exciting edition of Phil's Morning Drive because I have made my way out to the San Francisco Bay Area in California to drive this 2017 Tesla Model S, but not just any Model S. This is the P100D, which is basically the top-of-the-line version. So this is one of the highest for range and also definitely the highest for performance. The higher range model would be without the P. It takes a little bit of range because this car has ludicrous mode. It also has ludicrous plus mode. So the 0 to 60 time is right around 2.5 seconds. You've probably seen a lot of videos online of people drag racing these. The really funny ones, I think, are when you have 4 or 5 people in the car, and then you're drag racing cars that are built to drag race, and then you can just drive home in utter silence with this car. So I've got this car for a day here, and so we're going to take it around the Bay Area. We're actually up here in the mountains at the moment, and so we're going to drive it around. I'm going to see what it's like, really, to live with this car on a daily basis. We're going to get it on the freeway. We're going to use AutoPilot, and so I hope you're looking forward to it. I know I am. So one of the first things I wanted to do with this car was take it across the Golden Gate Bridge and up to the North Bay area, because all of these roads, as you can see, we're doing like 15 miles an hour going around these curves. But one of the big things about this car, because it has such a low center of gravity, those batteries are all along the floorboard of the car underneath. And so because of that, I wanted to experience what the handling is like. This is not really a small car. It's a pretty spacious car, not only with cargo in the back, but it has the option for a third row of rear-facing seats. You have tons of legroom in the second row. There's a lot of space up here in the front. And so these cars typically you don't think of as being good handling cars. Most of them in this kind of a luxury category, they just kind of waft around and they don't necessarily have a sporty feel to them. But I know one of the goals with this car was not only to make it luxurious, but also to make it fun to drive. That's really something I think a lot of other electric cars have been missing. They kind of have this kind of a golf cart type feel. You know, cars like the Nissan Leaf and those, they're really more like a city car. Whereas this car has been designed to have the peak amount of performance with the peak amount of range, and it really gives you that feel, especially out here on these twisty roads. It's really a lot of fun to drive. I've really been pleasantly surprised by it. Being somebody who loves cars as much as I do, I've always been a little skeptical of the electric vehicle market. I know this is the way things are going and the way things are changing, but it's something that I really enjoy hearing the exhaust note. I like to hear loud exhaust. That's really part of the experience to me, especially if you have a convertible and you want to do some driving on roads like we're on now, and you want to hear the exhaust and it kind of echoes through the hills and stuff. But don't make a mistake, because this is a car that is still a lot of fun to drive, and going through these hills silently is a very eerie feeling, especially with the amount of power that this car has. It really, you can zoom in and out of here very quickly. It makes the car, I would say as the car gets up to speed, it really kind of wraps around you, and you can kind of adjust the steering to be more of a sporty feel, and so whenever you do that, it stiffens things up there. This car does have an air suspension, and so that really helps too with a sporty versus comfort feel. It really makes things very smooth on some of the bumpier roads, especially when you're in town. But when you're out here, it has a lot sportier of a feel than what I anticipated. One of the things I find interesting about Tesla in general is it seems to me that people who have them or buy them or who've spent a lot of time with them really, really love them. There's just something about the community as far as this. We took this up to a supercharger a little bit earlier, and the supercharger was full, and you almost felt like it was a meetup for a club or something, because all these Tesla owners are there, and they have various models, various levels of pricing, performance, range, but everybody's just kind of like, well, how do you like yours? How do you like this one? And so there's really this sense of community, which is something that I think people are concerned about. Car enthusiasts are really concerned about the future of automobiles in that sense, that everything's going to be boring, it's going to be slow, it's not going to make any noise, and that people aren't going to be excited about cars anymore. But I don't think that's the case at all, especially after being in an area like Northern California where these cars have been popular for quite a while now, which makes a lot of sense because they're built just down the road. In other parts of the country, if they're not as prevalent, I think people maybe just are a little more cautious about them just because they haven't really seen them and they haven't had a chance to be in one. The topic of charging always comes up when you have a conversation about electric vehicles, especially if you're talking with someone that is skeptical about them. When it comes to Tesla, they stand alone in the marketplace for 2 reasons. Number 1, they have the longest range at over 300 miles, depending on the model. Number 2, they're solving the lack of charging infrastructure problem by installing their own chargers all around the world. The beauty of these so-called superchargers is the speed, because they can put up to 170 miles of range back into the vehicle in just 30 minutes. I stopped for lunch at the supercharger station in Petaluma, California. This particular location has 10 superchargers, all of which were in use when I arrived. Having Tesla exclusive chargers that are the fastest chargers on the market is really the main reason Tesla is leading the charge on electric vehicles, and yes, that pun was intended. The navigation system can route you through superchargers on a long road trip, making it easy for you to stop, plug in, then go shop or eat or just stretch your legs while you wait. Now, of course, it's not nearly as fast as a typical stop for gasoline, but I, for one, always like to stop for a nice, relaxing lunch when out and about. Once a spot opens up, you simply grab the cable, hold it close to the plug door, which then opens. You plug it in, and you head off. You can check in on the charging progress and see how much range has been added while you're away using the Tesla app. Something else that's exciting about a car like this is they really have spent just as much time thinking about the software and this humongous screen and all the different functions that you have. They've spent just as much time thinking about that as they have the actual hardware, as far as what's the material going to be for the steering wheel, what's the headliner, what are the colors, all of those kind of things that I feel like a traditional manufacturer spends a lot of time on. Well, there's so many things that you can do in this software. Before we left, I spent about 30 or 45 minutes just going through every single menu in here, and you can customize everything from the steering feel. I mentioned that there's normal and sport, and so you have that option, but there's so many other things that you can customize, and they continuously provide these over-the-air updates, and so your car will get new features from time to time. One thing I didn't realize, speaking of the software updates, before I really drove this and really got into some of the sub menus, is that you can go in here and see the last time that it got a software update, which might have been while you were sleeping or while you were parked at a restaurant or something, and it will tell you what's new in the car. And so one of the things, this one, its latest update, just got an auto brightness feature for all of the different screens that you have in here. And so that's a nice feature. It's been added after you've already owned this car. In fact, it's added really without even your knowledge, because it's updating the same way that you would have auto update on your smartphone or your laptop or something like that. One of the other things that's interesting about those software updates, and when I was talking with the folks from Tesla about this, is that there are so many of the problems. If you just make a phone call, something's acting weird or you're not sure what's going on, you can make a phone call and they can diagnose basically any problem. It's about up to like 70 or 80% of the problems can be diagnosed and then fixed over the air. So you don't have to take your car into a service center. They can get into it remotely, the same way they would access your computer or your phone. And then they can go in and troubleshoot it and all that stuff. So it doesn't have to be one of these situations where you have to take a lot of time off work and take it in, unless it's something serious or something that's mechanical. But if it's a software related problem, they can tap into the car or dial in or whatever you want to call it and then make the adjustments, which saves you a trip, and it's something that could be done while your car's at work or even while it's at your house. Speaking of software, the amount of technology that the AutoPilot system uses is simply mind-blowing. Now, I've spent my fair share of time using the adaptive cruise control feature from a number of different manufacturers, but AutoPilot takes it to a whole new level. You set the distance between you and the other cars by the number of car lengths instead of feet, which is so much more reasonable. Then, once you get on the highway or freeway, you will see a steering wheel icon appear on the dash. What this means is the cameras and the sonar sensors are receiving enough information from the lines on the road to engage AutoPilot. Once you do that, the system will take over steering, braking, and accelerating. If the road starts to curve, not a problem. Someone jumps into your lane, not a problem. Once the lane is clear, you're back in business. Another neat feature is that you don't have to set the speed per se like you would on traditional cruise control. You set how many miles per hour over the speed limit you're comfortable with or at the speed limit. Then it simply adjusts according to changes in traffic or the speed limit where you are. Now, you do have to keep at least one hand on the wheel or it will start to get mad at you. If you leave your hand off the wheel for too long, AutoPilot will disengage. Probably the spookiest of features with AutoPilot is when you want to change lanes while AutoPilot is engaged. All you have to do is hold down your turn signal for the lane that you would like to go to, right or left. Then the cameras and sonar will check to make sure that there's no one in the lane next to you or in your blind spot. And then without your input, the car will simply steer to the next lane over. The first time you do this is a little spooky, but you'd be surprised how fast you'll get used to it. One of the things I like to talk about with any car that I test drive are pros and cons. Well, the pros to this car is it really feels cutting edge. It feels futuristic. especially with all of these screens, the way you interact with these screens. It feels futuristic, but also it's a familiar feeling at the same time, especially if you've used a smartphone or a tablet in the last 5 to 10 years or so. If you've done that, then this will really feel very natural to you. There are some times where I wouldn't mind having like a volume knob or something, but a lot of those controls are on the steering wheel and things, so it just takes a little bit to get used to, just like any other car. So this particular model is the top of the line version of the Model S. And so you're looking at a price tag that starts right around $140,000 to $150,000. This one has pretty much every single option, so it's pushing the $160,000 mark. And that's a lot of money, sure, but when you think about the fact that this has every option, this is everything that Tesla can put into a car, that's really not that terrible. Because if you think about the Mercedes S-Class, which is the top of the line car for them, the BMW 7 Series, and the new Porsche Panamera that's just come out, which is available now as a plug-in hybrid, and it has a ton of power and all this kind of thing, all of those cars are somewhat competitively priced, depending on what engine that you choose. And you're still not going to have the same feeling of the torque that this car has because of the electric motors. So I could see for some folks saying that the price is a con, but I think if you're already in the market for a four-door sedan that's in the 100,000 plus category, these guys have really just burst onto the scene. I mean, the Mercedes S-Class, BMW 7 Series, the Audi A8, those type of cars have been around for a very long time, and those are all very good cars. And so if you're not ready to make the switch to electric, I could see why you would choose something like that. But Tesla's working very hard. They're really working overtime to make this car feel luxurious, to make it feel quiet, and to be a viable competitor to those vehicles. So as far as using this as a city car, I mean, a lot of people want to talk about the Ludicrous mode and Ludicrous Plus mode, which is extremely impressive. But really, being in traffic like this and it being so silent in here, I mean, if I stop talking, there's about 4 lanes of traffic around us, and there's a lot of cars. Now we're going into a tunnel, which typically echoes. You know, features like this bioweapons defense system and AutoPilot, a lot of these things are so futuristic, and some of them completely not necessary. But I love those kind of features. I think that's just the greatest thing ever. When you can put stuff on there that's really cool, it doesn't really change. It's not a deal breaker of whether or not you're going to buy the car, but it's just something that's really cool and something that I think more manufacturers should do. Spend time putting things on cars that make them fun and make them exciting. And do you need it? No, but that's not the point. Something else that I have to mention, you can't drive a Tesla and not be somewhat mesmerized the first few times that you're in it with this humongous touchscreen that's into the middle, that you can split the screen and put, you know, your audio stuff on one side, you can put the nav on one side. It's highly customizable. And it works just like a tablet, but it's bigger than really any tablet. I think it's much bigger than an iPad Pro. And so the fact is that there's really not any real buttons in this car. I mean, you have the shifter here to put it in reverse or drive. You have the turn signal and the wiper stalk over here. You have a couple of buttons on the steering wheel for voice activation and to kind of navigate through some of the menus that are on the actual dash. But other than that, there's basically no buttons in here. Driving in all these different environments, it really makes sense if you live in a big metropolitan area, because you have charging that's available a lot of different places, in addition to the superchargers if you want to venture out and away from the city, or you want to go from one extreme area to another. And so it really makes sense. I think other parts of the country, other parts of the world, this is going to get more and more common. If you go to Tesla's website, you can see where they're adding these superchargers, which is pretty much everywhere. There's a whole bunch that are coming to the Bay Area in not very much time. Well, I hope you've enjoyed this episode with the 2017 Tesla Model S P100D. We have a lot more of our content on our website. Just go to philsmorningdrive.com, and we'll see you next time.